trying to save what's left of the Middle East. Welcome to SkyWatchTV News for Monday, August 31st, 2015. I'm Derek Gilbert. In studio today, a special guest. He's a Pentagon strategist, retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel, and an expert in Middle East security, the author of the forthcoming book, Never Submit: Will the Extermination of Christians Get Worse Before It Gets Better? Published by Defender, should be available very soon in the SkyWatch TV store. Lieutenant Colonel Bob Maginnis. Colonel, it's an honor.
Thank you, Derek.
The situation in the Middle East, for Christians especially, there's been unrest and turmoil in the Middle East, well, since the days of King Solomon or the days of King Saul. But specifically for Christians in the Middle East, it's been a nightmare the last decade or so. 1.5 million Iraqi Christians prior to our invasion in 2003, maybe 200,000 left, and fewer every single day. From your perspective as a military strategist, analyst, is there anything, what can the United States military do at this point to save what's left of the Christian communities in Syria and Iraq?
Well, what I deal with in the book, Derek, is, if the president, backed by the Congress, decides that they want something done, we can certainly create enclaves that protect Christians that are gathered in places like the Nineveh Plain or, up in Erbil near northern Iraq, or some of the refugee camps. Christians don't even want to go in the refugee camps in Jordan or Syria or Turkey because they're filled with Islamists that target the Christians. So the Christians are really in a very bad situation. I think bottom line is, the real perpetrator of most of the killing is ISIS, Iraqi state. And if they aren't defeated, and they won't be defeated from the air alone, you have to have ground troops. Now, the Obama administration has tried to train Syrian rebels, has tried to train the Iraqi security forces, not doing well on either front. And even John Allen, who is the retired general that's the envoy for President Obama, has said, this is a generational war. This is not something that's going to end tomorrow. Right. And especially not going to end tomorrow if we, the United States, don't do more. Now, will it take 20,000 troops to get in there? We could go in there and we could kill these people. And that may become necessary because right now we're not getting a lot of help from any of the so-called allies in the region. The Turks won't do it. The Jordanians have a very small defense force. The Iraqis I've addressed. Certainly the Syrians, the Lebanese aren't going to do it. The Saudis aren't going to do it. So this cancer is metastasizing across the entire region, not just the Middle East, North Africa, Central Asia, and it's infecting Western Europe and the United States, as we're beginning to see in some of these lone wolf so-called incidents across this country. So if you don't cut the cancer off at the root, very soon it's going to get out of control, and we're close to that point now.
How prepared is the leadership in Washington, D.C., both in the White House and in the Pentagon, to understanding the threat of the Islamic State?
Well, a lot of the people at the National Security Council, which is right next to the White House, have chosen to put on blinders and to ignore what the intelligence has been telling them for years. They don't want to go contrary to the president saying that this is the JV, this is not Islamic, an Islamic problem. It's un-Islamic, the president says. So they refuse to recognize the real threat. Now, the people in the Pentagon, here we have an investigation here recently that's been announced that, people have been spinning the intelligence to the point to make our efforts against them look more successful. And in fact, they're getting much worse all the time. So it's incredibly bad what's going on in Washington, because the politicians are saying one thing, the generals and the intelligence community are being shut out of the equation, and meanwhile Christians are being slaughtered across the Middle East, and that slaughter is growing.
Yeah, it was described in one piece I read last year as the culmination of a 10-year descent into hell for Christians in the Middle East.
Absolutely.
The Islamic State has not been shy about telling us what they're all about. In fact, they even named their official magazine Dabiq, telling us that they're looking forward to a cataclysmic battle against the forces of Rome, Christendom, presumably the United States, at which Isa, Jesus, their version of Jesus, not the real Jesus, appears and leads them to a victory. A third of the Muslims will be gloriously killed and live as martyrs. A third of them will run away, cursed by Allah forever. But the other third will then go and take over Constantinople, Istanbul, and from there then presumably take over the world. They're telling us this in their own documentation. Why doesn't our government believe them?
Well, because the government purposely doesn't want to believe that this is an Islamic problem. Not only do they talk theologically, they talk eschatologically about the end times. They use the words that suggest that this is the end times from their perspective. They want to bring on the apocalypse. That's what they want to do. And when you talk about Dabiq, of course, is the city that is in one of the prophet's hadiths, one of his sayings that goes back to the 7th century, that says this is where the final battle. And who are they going to fight in the final battle? They call it the Romans.
Right.
And the Romans, well, guess who? It's not the Pope. It's probably the United States.
The forces of Christendom.
They're trying to bring all these Christian forces into Dabiq, which is on the Turkish border in Syria, and they want to have a final battle because then their Jesus, their Messiah, is going to be involved in getting rid of the Antichrist and all this. This is the way they think. They are living in the 7th century. They want everyone around them to live in the 7th century, or as they say, they're going to takfir, they're going to destroy those that don't believe as they do.
The irony is that while they're living in the 7th century, they're using 21st century social media to recruit.
And our weapons that they've stolen from the Iraqis and elsewhere.
How do you see this playing out? I mean, is there good news here? I mean, are you optimistic, pessimistic? What happens going into 2015, 2016?
Well, if we don't have good leadership, we're going to continue in the same vein we're going right now, and they're going to fill their ranks with recruits. It's going to expand beyond the Libya and the Sinai and Afghanistan. It's going to go throughout much of northern Africa, much of Central Asia, into the Caucasus, into southern Russia. It's spreading like a cancer. You've got to put this cancer out. And unfortunately, it's being ignored by many of the political class in Washington. The generals, they're smart people. But in our constitutional frame of government, we take orders from the political leaders. And if the political leaders tell us, no, that's not the problem, ignore that, then we're going to continue to ignore it.
Is this the next great wave of Islamic expansion?
Well, it certainly could be for this country. If we continue to turn a blind eye to Islamic immigration in this country, we're not allowing Christians in. The Obama administration is only allowing Muslims in from places like Syria. And if we don't push back on these groups that fail to integrate, that want Sharia law, that want to do things that makes it politically incorrect to say anything negative about Islam, then we're going to have a very serious problem, much like what Western Europe is going through right now. They are covered with all sorts of terrible problems. They're losing their culture, literally, and their language, their future. They're oppressed, and yet, the same thing can happen to America.
Colonel Bob Maginnis, his new book, Never Submit: Will the Extermination of Christians Get Worse Before It Gets Better? Forthcoming from Defender Publishing in the very near future. Don't forget, tomorrow night we begin a series of programs on preparedness on SkyWatchTV. What happens in the event of the unthinkable, an EMP, social unrest, a situation where you may not be able to leave home for a period of time. Josh Tolley talks with us about that tomorrow night, 8:30 p.m. Central Time on the Christian Television Network. That's DirecTV Channel 376, Dish Network Channel 267, the Glory Star Satellite Channel 117, or you can watch it on the Christian Television Network's live stream at their website. That's ctnonline.com. Tomorrow night, 8:30 p.m. Central Time. Colonel Maginnis, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Derek.
And thank you for watching as we keep watch. I'm Derek Gilbert, and this is SkyWatch TV.